At the center of a polished family dinner under crystal lights and quiet wealth, Caleb Whitmore leaned forward and spat beside his wife's plate, calling her dead weight in front of his parents and his mistress. No one stopped him. Not his mother, not his father, not the woman sitting in Olivia Hart's seat, smiling like she already owned his life. To Caleb, Olivia was nothing more than a burden he regretted marrying. But what he didn't know, what no one at that table truly understood, was that the woman he had just humiliated signed the checks that built their entire family's reputation. And the calm way she looked at him afterward wasn't weakness. It was a decision. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Weeks earlier, before the dinner that would change everything, Olivia was still pretending her marriage could be saved. The Whitmore estate sat on a quiet stretch of land just outside the city, all clean lines, glass walls, and carefully curated luxury. It was the kind of place that looked effortless, like wealth had always lived there, like it belonged. Olivia moved through the house like a guest. She kept her steps light, her voice softer than necessary. Even the way she dressed had shifted over time, simpler, quieter, less noticeable. It hadn't happened all at once. It never did. It was a slow adjustment, piece by piece, until she barely recognized the version of herself reflected in the tall hallway mirrors. From the dining room, she could already hear Caleb's voice. Loud, confident, controlled. He was on a call, pacing near the long table, talking about expansion partnerships, numsarchy numbers he tossed around like they were his to command. Olivia paused just outside the room, listening without meaning to. "We'll lock the deal next quarter," Caleb said. "My family's been with Hartwell for decades. We know how this works." Hartwell. The name lingered in the air. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly around the glass she was holding, not enough for anyone to notice, just enough for her to feel it. She stepped inside before he could turn and see her hesitation. Caleb ended the call without acknowledging her presence. He didn't need to. That had become normal. "You're early," he said, glancing at his watch instead of her face. "I've been here," Olivia replied calmly. He didn't respond, just walked past her, already moving on to something else. The distance between them wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It existed in small moments like this. The lack of eye contact, the absence of simple courtesy, the way he spoke around her instead of to her. By the time his parents arrived later that evening, the house had transformed. Candles lit, table set, wine breathing, everything perfect, everything staged. Margaret Whitmore walked in first, her posture sharp, eyes scanning the room with quiet judgment. Behind her came Richard, quieter but no less observant, and then Vanessa. She didn't hesitate at the doorway, didn't pause to ask if she was welcome. She walked in like she already belonged, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a kind of certainty Olivia hadn't seen in a long time. "Caleb's," Vanessa said with the smile that didn't reach her eyes. He smiled back. That was new. Olivia noticed it immediately. The ease in his expression, the warmth he no longer gave her. No one introduced Vanessa, no one explained. They simply moved around her presence as if it had always been there. Dinner started with polite conversation, business updates, social events. The usual rhythm of people who measured worth in success and proximity to power. Olivia stayed quiet, not invisible to taunt, not entirely, but close enough. At one point, a staff member entered to refill the wine. He hesitated when he reached Olivia's side. Just for a second. His posture shifted slightly, more respectful than the others. "Mom," he said quietly. It was subtle, easy to miss, but Margaret noticed. Her eyes flicked toward Olivia, then away again, dismissing it as nothing. Olivia didn't react. She simply nodded once, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The conversation shifted again, this time toward Caleb. His latest project, his expansion plans, his growing influence. Vanessa leaned closer to him as he spoke, her hand resting lightly on his arm, casual, intentional. Olivia's gaze dropped to the table. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, didn't ask what was already obvious. Respect, she had learned, couldn't be demanded in a room like this. Only revealed, and she wasn't ready for that, not yet. Because revealing it would mean ending everything. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, even to herself, she wasn't ready to walk away. Not like this, not without understanding how it had fallen apart so completely. The tension built slowly, almost politely, until it didn't. Vanessa laughed at something Caleb said, then glanced at Olivia, her smile sharpening. "You've been awfully quiet," she said. "Is that your thing? Or do you just not have anything to add?" The table stilled. Olivia lifted her eyes, calm, steady. "I prefer to listen," she said. Vanessa tilted her head. "That must make life easy. No pressure to contribute." A small laugh followed, not loud, just enough. Caleb didn't stop it, didn't correct it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair watching Olivia like she was something distant, something already gone. "You've been living off my family long enough," he said, his tone flat. "Maybe it's time you started contributing something real." Silence. Olivia felt it then. Not the insult, not even the betrayal, but the shift. The moment something inside her settled into place, he believed that, truly believed it. That everything he had came from himself. That she was just there. Her fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the table. Steady, measured, she could correct him. One sentence would be enough. One name, one document, one truth. But she didn't, because truth, once spoken, couldn't be taken back. And she needed him to finish revealing who he really was first. The room held its breath, and then Caleb leaned forward. What followed would echo far beyond that table. But Olivia didn't flinch, she simply watched him, as if memorizing the exact moment everything ended. A few minutes later, she stood. "Excuse me," she said softly. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. She walked out of the room with the same quiet composure she had carried all evening. But once the door closed behind her, she didn't slow down. She moved through the hallway, past the glass walls, past the reflection she no longer needed to recognize, until she reached her phone. For a moment, she just held it. Then she unlocked the screen and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in years. Her thumb hovered. Not hesitation. Precision. When she pressed call, the line rang only once. "Miss Hart," a calm voice answered immediately. Not Olivia. Not Mrs. Whitmore. "Miss Hart, I think it's time," she said quietly. There was a pause on the other end, not confusion, recognition. "Understood," the voice replied. "I'll prepare the documents." Olivia ended the call, and for the first time that night her expression changed. Not into anger, not into sadness, into something far more dangerous. Clarity. Back in the dining room, laughter resumed. Caleb poured another glass of wine, unaware that the woman he had just dismissed had already made a decision that would reach far beyond that table, and by the time he realized what he had done, it would already be too late. The call ended, and for a moment Olivia just stood there in the quiet hallway, the faint echo of laughter still drifting from the dining room behind her. It sounded distant now, hollow. Like something she no longer belonged to. She slipped her phone back into her hand and straightened her posture. Not stiff, not defensive, just steady. That was the first decision she had made in a long time that felt entirely her own. When she returned to the dining room, no one noticed she had been gone. Or maybe they did, and it simply didn't matter. Caleb was pouring another glass of wine, his back half turned toward her. Vanessa had taken a seat closer to him now, her chair angled slightly inward, as if she had always belonged in that space. Margaret was mid-sentence, discussing a charity board she had recently joined, her voice controlled and precise. Olivia walked back to her seat without a word. No one asked where she had been. No one offered her a place back in the conversation. That, more than anything, made the shift undeniable. She sat down quietly, folding her hands in her lap. The plate in front of her had gone cold. "Let's be honest," Vanessa said lightly, her voice cutting through the room. "Some people just don't grow with the life they marry into." Margaret smiled faintly. "That's a generous way to put it." Olivia didn't look up. Caleb did. And this time, he didn't hide it. "You've been holding me back for years," he said, his tone casual, like he was stating a fact everyone already agreed on. "I just didn't see it sooner." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, not tense. Accepting. Richard adjusted his glass but said nothing. Margaret didn't interrupt. Vanessa's lips curved into something small and satisfied. Olivia lifted her eyes slowly. She met Caleb's gaze directly. For a brief second, something flickered there. Not guilt, not hesitation, just curiosity. like he was waiting to see if she would finally react, finally break. She didn't. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said. Her voice was soft, even. And that seemed to irritate him more than anything. "That's it?" he asked. "That's all you have to say?" Olivia held his gaze a moment longer, then lowered it again. There was nothing to prove, nothing to defend, because the truth didn't need volume. Vanessa let out a quiet laugh. "It's almost impressive," she said, "the way she just accepts it." Margaret nodded. Some people are more comfortable staying small. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly again. Not from anger, from recognition. This was who they were. And more importantly, this was who Caleb had chosen to become. The man who once sat across from her in a cramped apartment, sketching business ideas on scrap paper, talking about building something meaningful, had slowly disappeared, replaced by someone who needed validation more than truth. Someone who believed proximity to wealth meant ownership of it. She exhaled quietly, and for the first time, she stopped trying to reconcile those two versions of him. Dinner dragged on. Conversations shifted again. Deals, expansion, connections. Names dropped casually like currency. At one point, Caleb mentioned a potential partnership with Hartwell Holdings again. "We're close," he said. "They need someone who understands long-term growth. Someone who's not afraid to move fast." Vanessa leaned in. "And they trust you?" "They will," Caleb replied. "My family's been tied to them long enough. That carries weight." Olivia's lips pressed together, just slightly. Not a smile, not quite. Just something that lived in between. The staff member returned to clear plates. The same one from earlier. His movements were efficient, careful. When he reached Olivia, he paused again. "Would you like anything else, Miss Hart?" he asked quietly. The room shifted. Small, subtle, but unmistakable. Margaret's eyes snapped toward him. "It's Mrs. Whitmore," she corrected sharply. The man froze. "Of course, my apologies." Olivia shook her head gently. "It's fine." Her tone carried no embarrassment, no correction, no need to assert anything. That somehow made it worse. Caleb frowned slightly. "Why would he call you that?" Olivia met his gaze again, calm as ever. Probably a mistake. He studied her for a second longer than necessary, then dismissed it. Because that was easier. Because anything else would require him to mention something he had already decided was true. Dinner ended not with closure, but with quiet fragmentation. Chairs moved, glasses emptied. Conversations drifted toward exits. Vanessa lingered close to Caleb, her hand resting comfortably against his arm now, no attempt to hide it. Margaret spoke to her like she was already family. Richard offered a polite nod, nothing more. Olivia stood last. No one asked her to stay. No one asked where she was going. She walked toward the hallway again, this time without hesitation. Upstairs, the air felt different, still, untouched by the noise below. She stepped into the study and closed the door behind her. For a moment, she just stood there. Then she moved toward the desk. Inside the top drawer, beneath a stack of neatly organized documents, sat a slim folder, dark, unmarked. She pulled it out carefully, opened it. Inside were copies, not originals. She never kept those here. Ownership summaries, board structures, signatory rights. Her name appeared where it mattered. Not loudly, not obviously, but definitively. She ran her fingers lightly over the page, then closed the folder again. Not yet. There was still something she needed. Not revenge, clarity. A knock came at the door, soft, controlled. Olivia didn't move right away. "Come in," she said. The staff member from downstairs stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. His posture was different now, straighter, more formal. "Miss Hart," he said under his breath. "I apologize for earlier." "You don't need to," Olivia replied. He hesitated. "Mr. Dillard called. He asked me to pass along a message directly. He said it couldn't wait." Olivia's expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened instantly. "What did he say?" The man swallowed. "The board has been notified. They're requesting your presence. Tomorrow morning." A pause. Then quieter. "They're preparing for a vote." Olivia stood still, completely still, because that wasn't part of the timeline she had set, which meant something had shifted. Something bigger than Caleb, bigger than this house. Her fingers closed slowly around the edge of the desk. "Did he say why?" she asked. "No, Mom," the man replied. "Only that it concerns your authority." Silence settled between them, heavy. "Precise," Olivia nodded once. Thank you, that will be all. He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and Olivia's calm slipped just slightly. Not into panic, into calculation, because whatever was coming next was no longer entirely under her control. Olivia didn't sleep. The study stayed dim through the night, the only light coming from the small lamp near the desk. The folder remained where she had left it, closed now, but not forgotten. Her phone rested beside it, silent. She sat in the chair for hours, not restless, not pacing, just still, thinking. A board vote. They weren't supposed to move this early, not without her. That was the entire point of the structure her father had built. Layers, approvals, safeguards. Nothing significant happened without her signature, without her presence. So either someone had grown impatient, or someone believed she wouldn't show up. That thought lingered longer than the others. Downstairs, the house eventually went quiet. Doors closed. Voices faded. The kind of silence that only came after people had said everything they needed to say, and none of it had mattered. At some point, Olivia stood and walked to the window. The estate looked the same as always. Still, controlled. Perfect from the outside. Inside, everything had already shifted. Her phone lit up. A message. Not from Caleb. Not from anyone in the house. Mark Dillard. She opened it. We need to talk before the meeting. There's been a change in the board alignment. Call me as soon as you can. Olivia stared at the words for a moment. Then she called. He picked up immediately. I was wondering when you'd reach out, Mark said, his voice low, steady, but tighter than usual. You said the board is preparing for a vote, Olivia replied. Why? A brief pause. They're pushing for operation control, he said, full executive authority. Olivia's grip on the phone tightened slightly. That requires my approval. It should, Mark said carefully. But there's a clause they're trying to interpret differently. Temporary delegation in the absence of active leadership. Olivia's gaze sharpened. I haven't stepped down. No, he agreed, but you've stayed silent. And they're using that. She turned away from the window, pacing slowly now. Who's backing this? Another pause. Caleb's name came up, Mark said, indirectly. That stopped her, not shock, not disbelief. Something colder. How? She asked. He's been positioning himself, Mark continued. Meeting with a few board members. Talking about expansion, stability, leadership gaps. Olivia let out a quiet breath. Of course, he didn't know what he was doing. But that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. They think he's independent, Mark added. That he's built his own network. They don't realize where his credibility actually comes from. Olivia almost smiled. Almost. They don't realize a lot of things, she said. Then you need to be there tomorrow, Mark said firmly. If you don't show up, they'll move forward without you. Silence settled between them again. Prepare everything, Olivia said finally. But don't stop them. Mark hesitated. Olivia, I said don't stop them, she repeated, her tone calm but absolute. Let them think they have control. Another pause. Then a quiet exhale. Understood, he said. She ended the call. For a moment, she just stood there, phone still in her hand. Then she placed it down and reached for the folder again. This time, she didn't just glance at it. She reviewed everything. Ownership percentages, voting rights, conditional authority clauses, every line, every signature. Every silent protection her father had built into the system. They weren't trying to take her out. They were trying to move around her. That was the mistake. Because moving around her meant stepping into a space they didn't fully understand. And Caleb, he was walking straight into it. Morning came quietly. No one knocked on her door. No one asked where she was going. When Olivia walked downstairs, the house was already awake. Margaret sat at the table with coffee, reading through something on her tablet. Richard stood by the window, hands behind his back. Caleb was there. So was Vanessa. She was wearing one of Margaret's scarves now, like she had been there long enough to borrow things. Olivia didn't comment. She didn't need to. You're up early, Caleb said, glancing at her briefly. I have somewhere to be, Olivia replied. Vanessa smiled faintly. Busy schedule for someone who doesn't work. Margaret didn't look up. Let her have her errands. Olivia walked past them, reaching for a coat. Actually, Caleb said, his tone shifting slightly. I might need you later. She paused, turned just enough to face him. For what? She asked. He leaned back in his chair. I have a meeting this afternoon. With Hartwell. Olivia held his gaze. "Congratulations," she said. He frowned slightly. "You don't even know what it's about." I don't need to," she replied. Vanessa laughed softly. "Confidence looks good on him, doesn't it?" Olivia's didn't respond. Caleb studied her again, something unreadable in his expression now. "You could learn something from that," he added. "About being useful." There it was again. That word, useful. Olivia slipped on her coat. "I hope your meeting goes well," she said, and then she walked out. The drive into the city was quiet. Not empty, focused. By the time she reached the building, everything inside her had settled again. Controlled, prepared. The lobby of Hartwell Holdings was exactly as it had always been. Clean, understated, powerful without needing to prove it. People moved with purpose. Conversations stayed low. Decisions happened quietly. As Olivia stepped inside, something shifted, not visibly, but in the way people noticed. A receptionist straightened slightly. A man near the elevators paused mid-sentence. And then, "Miss Hart." She turned. A senior executive approached, his expression respectful, his posture careful. "Good morning," he said. "We weren't expecting you until the meeting." Olivia nodded once. "I prefer to be early." "Of course," he said quickly. "Mr. Dillard is already upstairs." She moved toward the elevator. No one stopped her. No one questioned her, because here she wasn't invisible. The doors opened. She stepped inside, and as this closed, her phone buzzed again. A message this time. From an unknown number. She opened it. A single line. "Looking forward to working with you today, Mrs. Whitmore. I believe we have a lot to discuss." Attached was a document. Olivia's eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Her expression didn't change, but her pulse did. Because at the bottom of the file there was Caleb's name, and a proposed authorization request. Granting him temporary executive access, pending board approval. Olivia lowered the phone slowly, and for the first time, she understood exactly what he thought he was about to become. Olivia didn't look away from the screen until the elevator doors opened. The document was still there, clear, formal, dangerous in the way only well-written contracts could be. Caleb's name wasn't hidden in it. It was placed exactly where it was meant to be seen, positioned as a candidate for temporary executive authority. Not ownership, not yet, but close enough to matter. Close enough to become irreversible if the wrong votes went through. She stepped out into the executive floor, her posture unchanged, her expression composed. But inside, everything had sharpened. Not panic, not fear, precision. Mark was waiting for her just outside the conference room. He looked older than he had the night before, as if the last few hours had added weight that couldn't be ignored. "You saw it," he said quietly. "I did," Olivia replied. He studied her face for a reaction. He didn't get one. "They've been building this for weeks," he continued, quietly. "Conversations behind closed doors. Caleb's been presenting himself as a solution." Olivia walked past him, stopping just short of the glass wall that overlooked the boardroom. Inside, several members were already seated. Some familiar, some not. "They think I'm absent," she said. "They think you've stepped back," Mark corrected gently. "And they're using that narrative." She watched the room in silence. Men and women who had worked alongside her father. People who had once stood when she entered a room, not out of obligation, but recognition. Respect built over years. Now they sat casually, discussing her position as if it were open space. "What exactly are they voting on?" she asked. "Interim control," Mark said. "Operational authority for a fixed period. Justified by leadership gaps. And Caleb? He's being positioned as a candidate for that authority, not officially nominated yet, but supported." Olivia nodded once. Of course he was. He had always been good at presenting himself. Confident. Persuasive. Convincing enough to make people believe what he believed about himself. That he had built everything on his own. That he deserved more. The problem wasn't that Caleb was ambitious. It was that he didn't understand the structure he was stepping into. And the people backing him didn't either. "Who's leading this?" she asked. Mark hesitated. "Harold Pierce," he said finally. Olivia's eyes shifted slightly. That name mattered. "He's been pushing for faster growth," Mark added. "More aggressive expansion. He thinks you've been holding the company back." Olivia let out a quiet breath. There it was. Not personal, strategic. Or at least they believed it was. "They want control," she said. "Yes, and they think Caleb is the way to get it." Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. Olivia turned away from the glass. Good, she said. Mark blinked. Good. She met his gaze. Let them think that, she replied. There was no hesitation in her voice now, no uncertainty, just clarity. They're underestimating him, Mark said carefully. No, Olivia corrected. They're underestimating me. Silence settled between them again. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. Not the same one from the house. This one was different. Originals, documents, verified copies. The kind that didn't leave room for interpretation. Mark's eyes flicked to it. You brought everything. I brought what I need, she said. Are you planning to stop the vote, he asked. Olivia paused, then shook her head. Not yet, he frowned. If they pass this, they won't, she said calmly. You can't guarantee that. I don't need to. Mark studied her, trying to understand. What are you waiting for? He asked. Olivia glanced back toward the boardroom. For them to commit, she said. To what? To their Miss Haled, slowly. You're letting this go further than it should. No, Olivia said. I'm letting it go exactly as far as it needs to. Because once they cross that line, there would be no going back. Not for them. Not for Caleb. A notification buzzed softly on her phone. She glanced down. Another message. This time from Caleb. Meeting's in an hour. Don't wait up. Olivia stared at the screen for a moment. Even now he was moving forward. Confident. Certain. Completely unaware of where he actually stood. She typed nothing back. Just locked the screen and slipped the phone away. Where is he meeting them? She asked. Mark checked his tablet. Conference room B, smaller group first. Then they're bringing him in here if things move forward. Olivia nodded. Everything was aligning. Faster than she expected, but clean. Predictable. And that made it easier. She stepped toward the boardroom doors. Mark moved slightly to block her path. Olivia, he said quietly. Once you walk in there, everything changes. She looked at him. For a moment, something softer flickered beneath the surface. Not doubt, not fear, memory. Of how things used to be. Of what this company had meant before it became this. Then it was gone. Everything already has, she said. He stepped aside. Olivia reached for the handle. Paused. Not because she wasn't ready, but because he understood exactly what this moment was. Not the reveal, not yet. Just the beginning of it. She pushed the door open. Inside, conversation slowed, then stopped. Heads turned. Some recognized her immediately. Others took a second longer. Harold Pierce was the first to stand. Miss Hart, he said. His tone polite, controlled, but edged with something else. Surprise, calculation. You're early. Olivia stepped inside, her presence shifting the room without effort. I like to stay informed, she replied. Her eyes moved across the table. One by one, measuring, assessing, and then she sat, not at the end, not in the center, but in the seat that mattered, the one no one else had taken. Because even in their assumption, they hadn't dared to. Harold cleared his throat. We were just discussing the current leadership structure. I gathered, Olivia said. And we believe, he continued, choosing his words carefully now, that temporary operational adjustments may be necessary. Temporary, Olivia repeated. Yes, she leaned back slightly, relaxed, unbothered. And you've already identified a candidate, she said. A brief pause. Then Harold nodded. We have someone in mind. Olivia's gaze didn't waver. I'd like to hear the full proposal, she said, because she wanted them to say it, out loud, on record. She folded her hands calmly on the table and waited. Outside, down the hall, footsteps approached. Confident, unhurried. Caleb. He was right on time, and he had no idea what room he was about to walk into. The door opened. Caleb stepped in with the same confidence he had carried all morning. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised. The kind of posture that assumed the room would adjust to him. It almost did. Almost. His gaze moved across the table, acknowledging faces, reading reactions. He caught Harold's nod. A few approving looks. Subtle signals that reinforced what he already believed. He belonged here. Then his eyes landed on Olivia, and for the first time since he walked in, he hesitated. Not long. Just enough for something to register. Confusion. What are you doing here? He asked, his tone sharp but controlled. No one answered for her. They waited. Olivia didn't rush. She didn't explain. She simply met his gaze. I had time this morning, she said. It wasn't an answer. Not really. Caleb frowned, stepping further into the room. This is a board meeting, I'm aware. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Behind him, Vanessa hovered near the doorway, clearly unsure whether she should come in. She stayed just outside, watching, her confidence less certain in this space. Caleb turned back toward the table, brushing off the moment. "Sorry about that," he said to the board. "I didn't realize we had guests." A few of them shifted uncomfortably. Harold cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for joining us. We were just discussing the interim leadership proposal." Caleb nodded, stepping closer. "Right, the operational transition." He spoke like it was already decided, like the conversation was a formality. Olivia watched him carefully. Not with anger, not even disappointment, with clarity. "You've been busy," she said, as her voice cut through the roops, quiet but impossible to ignore. Caleb glanced at her again. "I've been doing what needs to be done." "And what exactly is that?" she asked. He didn't hesitate, fixing the gaps, making sure this company doesn't stall because someone decided to step back. A few board members shifted again. That line had been practiced, rehearsed, fed to him. Olivia leaned back slightly in her chair. "Interesting," she said. Harold stepped in quickly. "We've been reviewing a temporary delegation structure. Given recent inactivity from primary leadership, we believe assigning operational authority to him," Olivia finished. Silence. Harold didn't deny it. Caleb straightened slightly, his confidence returning. "I've already outlined a strategy. Expansion into 2 new markets, restructuring underperforming divisions." Olivia raised a hand. Not sharply enough. He stopped. Mid-sentence. The room stilled. "Before we get into strategy," she said calmly, "I'd like to clarify something." Her eyes moved across the table. Slow. Deliberate. "You're proposing to grant executive authority based on what, exactly?" Harold adjusted his posture. "Based on demonstrated initiative and capability." "And approval thresholds?" she asked. "They would be adjusted temporarily." "By whose authorization?" That question lingered. No one answered immediately. Caleb stepped in. "The board has the right to act when leadership is absent." Olivia turned her gaze to him fully now. "And you believe leadership is absent?" He didn't hesitate. Yes, there it was, clear. Simple. Wrong. Olivia nodded once as if acknowledging his answer. Then she reached into her bag. The room watched, not knowing why, not yet. She pulled out the folder, placed it gently on the table. Not open, just there. "Before you move forward," she said, "I'd recommend reviewing the governance structure more carefully." Harold frowned slightly. "We've reviewed it extensively." "I'm sure you have," Olivia replied. Her tone didn't challenge him. It corrected him, subtly. Caleb crossed his arms. "This isn't complicated, Olivia. If you're not involved, someone else has to be." She looked at him, really looked at him, not as her husband, not as the man she had once believed in, but as someone standing exactly where his assumptions had placed him. "You think this is about involvement," she said quietly. "It is," he replied. "No," she said. "It's about understanding what you're stepping into." He let out a short laugh. "I understand exactly what I'm doing." That was the problem. The confidence, the certainty, the complete absence of doubt. Olivia opened the folder, not fully, just enough to reveal the first page. Signatures, dates, authority lines. Legal language that didn't leave room for interpretation. She didn't slide it across. Didn't present it, not yet. Instead, she closed it again, because this wasn't the moment, not the full one. She needed them to go further. "To commit." Harold leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Hart, if you have concerns, we can address them after." "No," Olivia said, still calm, still controlled, "but you'll address them now." The shift was subtle, but it landed. Caleb's expression hardened. "You don't get to dictate this." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention back to Harold. "You said temporary authority," she said. "Define temporary." "Until stability is restored," he replied. "And who determines that?" "The board." Olivia nodded again. Every answer, every step, exactly as expected. Caleb exhaled, clearly losing patience. "This is a waste of time. The company needs urgent. I'm offering it." "And what makes you qualified?" Olivia asked. He looked at her like the answer was obvious. "I built my firm from the ground up," he said. "I understand growth, risk, execution. You understand access," she interrupted softly. He stopped. The room felt smaller, tighter. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means," Olivia said, "you've had proximity to something you never fully understood." His jaw tightened. "You think I don't understand business?" "I think," she said, You've confused visibility with control. That landed, harder than anything else she had said. For a second, something cracked through his confidence. Then it closed again. You're out of your depth here, he said. And this time Olivia smiled, just slightly, not warm, not kind. Certain, am I? She asked. The room went quiet, because something had changed, not loudly, not visibly, but enough for the people at that table to feel it. To question, even for a second, whether they had misread something. Caleb didn't notice. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the table. Let's stop pretending, he said. This company needs leadership. Real leadership. Not silence. Not hesitation. Olivia watched him, and then she did something no one expected. She leaned back, relaxed, and said nothing. Because sometimes the most powerful move was letting someone finish building their own mistake. Harold cleared his throat again. We should proceed with the vote. A few heads nodded. Papers shifted. Pens lifted. Caleb hailed, satisfied, certain, and Olivia sat perfectly still, waiting. Because once they cast those votes, there would be no undoing what came next. The first hand raised. Then another. And just as the third followed, the door opened again. This time, no knock. A man stepped inside, holding a sealed envelope. He didn't look at Caleb. Didn't look at Harold. He walked straight to Olivia and stopped. Miss just arrived from legal. The room froze. Caleb frowned. What is that? The man didn't answer him. He placed the envelope in front of Olivia, respectfully. Deliberately, Olivia looked down at it, then up, her eyes moving across the table one last time, measuring, deciding, and then she broke the seal. The paper slid free with a soft, deliberate sound. Olivia didn't rush. She unfolded the document slowly, her eyes scanning the first lines without any visible reaction. The room stayed silent. Every movement paused. Every breath held just a little tighter than before. Caleb watched her, irritation still written across his face. What is that? He asked again, sharper now. Olivia didn't answer him. She finished reading, then turned the page. The legal language was precise, clean. Exactly what she expected, and exactly what she hadn't planned for this early. Mark hadn't been exaggerating. They had already moved, not just positioning, execution. Olivia lowered the document slightly and looked up. Her gaze moved across the board, stopping briefly on Harold. You've already initiated the filing, she said. It wasn't a question. Harold's expression shifted just slightly. We've begun preliminary steps. Nothing is finalized. Olivia nodded once, as if acknowledging something minor. But inside, the structure had clicked into place. They weren't just preparing for control. They were trying to secure it before she stepped in, and Caleb, he was the face of it. Preliminary, she repeated. Then she placed the document flat on the table, turning it just enough for the nearest board members to see. Then let's be clear about what you've started, she said. A few leaned forward. Harold didn't. He already knew. Caleb stepped closer, his patience thinning. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Olivia turned her head slightly toward him. Am I? She asked. He exhaled sharply. Yes. This is simple. The company needs direction. They've asked me to step in. That's it. That's not it, Olivia said. Her tone stayed calm. But something underneath it had changed. Not louder. Sharper. You've submitted a request for executive authority under a temporary delegation clause, she continued, her eyes back on the document, citing leadership absence and operational risk. A few heads turned. Because now she wasn't speaking vaguely. She was speaking precisely. Caleb hesitated for the first time. Just a fraction. Then he recovered. That's standard procedure. Olivia looked at him again. Only if the clause applies, she said. Harold stepped in. It does. Under the current conditions, it doesn't, Olivia said, cutting across him, still without raising her voice. Silence. That word landed heavier than anything else so far. Caleb frowned. And how would you know that? Olivia held his gaze. Because she did. Because she knew every line in that document. Because she had signed the original structure years ago, standing beside the only person who had ever trusted her with it. But she didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, she reached for the folder she had brought. This time, she opened it fully. Pages spread across the table. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just undeniable. Section 14, she said, sliding one document slightly forward. Temporary delegation requires verification of leadership incapacity or voluntary absence. Harold leaned in despite himself. Olivia continued. Neither has been established. Caleb let out a short laugh, more defensive now. You haven't been involved. That's absence. No, Olivia said. That's assumption. The room tightened. And now the gap was visible, not between Olivia and the board. Between what Caleb believed and what actually existed. You think showing up today changes that? He pressed. Olivia's expression didn't shift. I think it clarifies it, she said. Harold straightened, trying to regain control of the room. Even if we revisit the clause interpretation, the board still has the authority to act in the company's best interest. Olivia nodded slowly. Yes, she said. You do. That surprised him. It surprised all of them, because it wasn't resistance, it wasn't denial. It was agreement, and that made it more dangerous. But acting in the company's best interest, she added, requires understanding who actually holds that interest. No one spoke. Caleb's jaw tightened again. You're talking in circles. Olivia glanced at him, just briefly. No, she said. I'm being very direct. Then she turned back to the board. You're trying to grant authority to someone who doesn't meet the qualification threshold outlined in your own governance structure, she said. Harold's voice hardened slightly. We determine those thresholds. Not entirely, Olivia replied. Another shift. Subtle, but enough. Because now, something wasn't aligning the way they expected. Caleb stepped forward again, his tone sharper. You keep saying that like you have some kind of say in this. Olivia looked at him fully now, and for a moment something passed between them. Not anger, not regret. Recognition of just how far apart they had become. I do, she said. 2 simple words. But they landed differently this time, because of everything that had come before, because of the documents on the table, because of the precision in her voice. Caleb's expression faltered, only for a second, but it was there. You're not part of this company, he said, slower now, like he needed to reassert the reality he believed in. Olivia didn't argue, didn't correct him. Instead, she picked up the document that had just been delivered, the one still warm from the sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. Not to Harold, not to Caleb, to the center. Then I suggest you read this, she said. Harold reached for it first. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then slowed, then stopped. The change in his expression was immediate, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Caleb noticed. What is it? He demanded. Harold didn't answer right off away because he was still reading, still processing. Olivia watched him calm, steady, waiting because this was the first crack, not the reveal, not yet. But the beginning of it, Harold finally looked up. His voice when he spoke was different. Where did you get this? He asked. Olivia didn't hesitate. It was addressed to me, she said. Caleb's irritation snapped back. Then tell us what it is. Harold glanced at him, then back at Olivia, then down at the document again, like he was weighing something, choosing carefully. It's a confirmation, he said slowly. From legal, of what? Caleb pressed. Silence, a long one. Then Harold exhaled and slid the document back across the table toward Olivia. As of this morning, he said, all controlling shares under the Hart estate have been consolidated. The room went still. Completely still. Caleb frowned. What does that mean? No one answered him, because for the first time, they weren't sure what he would do when he understood. And Olivia didn't explain. Not yet. She simply placed her hand over the document and let the silence grow. Because now they were finally starting to realize they had miscalculated something fundamental. And Caleb was still the only one in the room who didn't see it. What does that mean? Caleb's voice cut through the silence. Sharper now, less controlled. No one answered him, not immediately. Because the people at the table were no longer looking at him. They were looking at Olivia. Harold shifted in his seat, his fingers still resting on the document. It means, he said slowly, choosing each word with care, that the controllings tied to the Hart estate have been legally consolidated under a single authority. Caleb frowned. And? He looked around the room, expecting clarification, expecting someone to translate the language into something that made sense in his world. No one did, because they understood, and he didn't. Olivia didn't rush to fill the gap. She's let it sit, let it stretch. Let the difference between knowledge and assumption become visible. It means, she said finally, her voice calm, that any decision regarding executive authority, restructuring, or delegation She paused just long enough. Requires my approval. Silence. Not the quiet from before. This one was heavier. Caleb blinked, processing, then shook his head slightly like he had misheard. That's not possible, he said. Olivia didn't respond. Harold did. It is, he said, his tone no longer steady. If the consolidation has been executed and verified, it has, Olivia said. 2 words, clean, certain, and final. Caleb looked between them, irritation shifting into something else now, something less defined. You're saying she has control? He asked, his voice tightening. Harold hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. Caleb let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No, that doesn't make sense. He turned to Olivia. You don't work here. Olivia met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't soften it. I never needed to, she said. That landed. Harder than anything else. Because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't emotional. It was factual. Caleb's expression flickered. Then what is this? He demanded, gesturing toward the document, toward the table, toward the entire room that no longer felt aligned with him. Olivia leaned forward slightly. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just enough to shift the center of gravity. This, she said, is what you've been trying to step into without understanding. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Every person in that room felt it, because they were part of it too. Harold cleared his throat, trying to regain structure. If Ms. Hart holds consolidated controlling shares, then the delegation proposal cannot proceed without her consent. A few board members exchanged glances. Subtle, but telling, because the conversation had already changed. Caleb noticed. What are you talking about? He said, his voice rising slightly. We're voting on this. You said we were voting. We were, Harold replied carefully. Then let's vote. Caleb pushed. Harold didn't move. No one did. Because the vote no longer mattered the way it had minutes of it ago. Olivia watched Caleb. Watched the frustration begin to fracture his certainty. You think this is still your decision, she said quietly. He turned to her sharply. It is. They brought me in. They considered you, she corrected. And they still are, he shot back. Olivia tilted her head slightly. Are they? She asked. The question hung there. Because now they weren't sure. Not the board, not Harold, and definitely not Caleb. Vanessa stepped inside the room then, unable to stay at the doorway any longer. What's going on? She asked, her voice tight with unease. No one answered her, because this wasn't a room she belonged in. And for the first time, she felt it. Caleb didn't look at her. His focus stayed locked on Olivia. You're playing some kind of game, he said. You show up out of nowhere, throw around legal language. I didn't show up out of nowhere, Olivia said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I've always been here. That silence again. But this time it carried something else. Recognition. From the people who had worked long enough to start connecting pieces. The quiet approvals. The unseen signatures. The decisions that had come from somewhere questioned. Until now, Caleb shook his head. No, that's not how this works. You don't just walk in and take control. Olivia held his gaze. You're right, she said, a brief pause. You don't. Then she reached for the document again, the one Harold had just read. And this time, she turned it fully toward the room. This isn't about taking control, she said. It's about clarifying who already has it. Harold's fingers slightly in the edge of the table, because now it was no longer subtle. No longer implied. The structure was being exposed layer by layer. Caleb's voice dropped, quieter now, but more dangerous. If this is true, he said, then why didn't anyone know? Olivia didn't hesitate because it wasn't necessary, she said. The answer wasn't defensive. It was honest, and that made it harder to dismiss. You let me, he started, then stopped himself, his jaw tightened. You let all of us believe something else. Olivia didn't look away. You believed what was convenient, she said. That landed deeper than anything else, because it wasn't just about him. It was about every decision, every assumption, every time they had chosen status over truth. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Caleb, this is getting ridiculous. Stay out of it, he snapped. She fell silent. Because now this wasn't about appearances, this was about control, and he was losing it. Harold leaned forward again, his voice careful. Ms. Hart, if what you're presenting is accurate, then we need to formally verify the consolidation before proceeding. It's already been verified, Olivia said. He hesitated. We still need. You'll receive official confirmation within the hour, she added. That stopped him, because she wasn't asking. She was informing. Caleb stared at her, something unsettled finally breaking through his expression. You're serious, he said. Not a question, a realization. Olivia didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the room had already shifted, not toward her, but away from him, and that was enough. For now, she leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed again. Controlled. Go ahead with your vote, she said calmly. The words confused them, all of them. Harold blinked. What? You wanted to proceed, Olivia said. So proceed. Caleb frowned. Why would you? Because I want to see who stands where, she said. Simple, direct, unavoidable. The room went still again. Because now the vote wasn't about authority, it was about allegiance, and everyone knew it. Harold looked around the table. Then back at Olivia, then at Caleb. The tension tightened. One wrong move, and it wouldn't just be a failed proposal. It would be exposure. Proceed, Olivia repeated softly. Her eyes didn't leave them. Not a single one. Because this was the moment she had been waiting for. Not the reveal, not yet, but the point where everyone would show their hand, and once they did, there would be no going back. Harold swallowed, lifted his pen, and said quietly, Let's take the vote. The first vote was quiet, a hand lifted, then another. Not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate. Each movement felt heavier than it should have, not because of the decision itself, but because of who was watching. Olivia didn't move. She sat still, her gaze steady, her expression unchanged. She didn't interrupt, didn't react, she simply observed, because this was what she needed, not their words, their choices. Harold cleared his throat after the third vote. In favor of temporary delegation of executive authority, he stopped. His eyes flicked toward Olivia again, then continued. Please indicate. 2 more hands rose. Caleb's lips curved slightly. There it was, validation, not complete yet, but enough to reinforce what he already believed, that he had stepped into something larger and the room had accepted him. He glanced at Olivia, waiting for something, a reaction, a shift, resistance. She gave him none. That unsettled him more than if she had argued. Across the table, one board member hesitated. His fingers hovered just above the surface. He looked at Olivia, then at Harold, then back at the paper in front of him. Slowly, his hand lowered. Abstained, he said quietly. The room tightened again, because now the cracks were visible. Not everyone was aligned. Not anymore, Harold nodded stiffly and continued. Opposed. No hands rose. But the silence didn't feel like agreement. It felt like uncertainty. Caleb exhaled slowly, leaning back just slightly. That's enough, he said. We have majority support. Olivia tilted her head a fraction. Do you? She asked. He frowned. Yes. Harold didn't confirm it immediately. He looked down at the table, counted, recounted, and then looked back up. Majority present, he said carefully, but not majority controlling. That distinction landed, hard. Caleb's expression shifted. What does that mean? It means, Harold said, choosing his words again, that the vote reflects board preference, but not enforceable authority, without shareholder confirmation. Silence. Because now they were no longer talking about opinion. They were talking about power. Caleb turned to Olivia. You're blocking this. I'm not blocking anything, she said. You just said the vote doesn't count. I said it doesn't execute, she corrected. He stepped forward again, frustration breaking through. That's the same thing. No, Olivia said quietly, it isn't. Her voice didn't rise. But the clarity in it did. The board can recommend, she continued. It can advise, it can even pressure. She paused. But it can't override ownership. That word settled into the room. Ownership, not leadership, not management, something deeper. Caleb's jaw tightened. You keep saying that like it's yours. Olivia didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, she turned her attention back to Harold. Finalize your record, she said. Document the votes. Make sure it's clear who supported the proposal. Harold blinked. You want it recorded? Yes. Her tone left no room for interpretation, because this wasn't about stopping them. It was about making sure their position existed, in writing. On record. Caleb let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're serious? She looked at him. I always have been. That's a silence again. But now it carried weight. Because the people at that table were starting to understand something they hadn't before. This wasn't a reaction. It was preparation. Vanessa shifted near the door, her voice lower now. Caleb, maybe we should just. Not now, he snapped. She went quiet again. Because whatever this was, it was bigger than she expected. Harold cleared his throat, trying to regain some structure. The vote has been recorded. The proposal has majority support among present board members. He hesitated. Pending shareholder confirmation. Olivia nodded once. Good. Caleb stared at her. You're acting like you've already decided the outcome. Olivia's expression didn't change. I have, she said. That hit, not because it was aggressive, but because it was calm, certain, final. Caleb stepped closer to the table, his voice dropping. You don't get to decide this alone. Olivia met his gaze. Don't I? For a second, something shifted. Not fully, but enough. Because now he wasn't completely sure. Harold reached for the document again, the one Olivia had brought, the one that had started this shift. His fingers hovered over it, then stopped. Because he understood what it meant, even if Caleb didn't. We need full legal confirmation before, Harold began. You'll have it, Olivia said. He looked at her. When? She glanced briefly at the clock on the wall. Then back at him, soon. The room felt smaller, tighter, like something was approaching, and everyone could feel it, even if they didn't understand what it was yet. Caleb shook his head slowly. You think you can just walk in here and undo everything? I haven't undone anything, Olivia said. She stood then, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to shift the room again. I've let you show me exactly where everyone stands. Her eyes moved across the table, one by one, not accusing, not angry, observing. Because this was what she needed. Not assumptions, not guesses, truth. Caleb's voice hardened. And what are you going to do with that? Olivia paused. Then she picked up her folder, closed it, held it in place. What I should have done a long time ago, she said. No explanation, no detail, just intent. Harold straightened slightly. Ms. Hart, we should wait for official confirmation before taking any further action. Olivia looked. You should, she said. And then she turned toward the door. Caleb stepped forward instinctively. Olivia. She stopped, but didn't turn around. You're not walking away from this, he said. Her shoulders remained still. I'm not, she replied. Then she opened the door and walked out. The room stayed silent behind her, because now they weren't sure what they had just voted for, or what it had just triggered. Outside, the hallway felt quieter than before, controlled, contained. Mark was waiting. He looked at her once, just once, and understood, he said quietly. Olivia nodded. Good. He hesitated. Legal just confirmed. The consolidation has been filed and recognized across all affiliated entities. Olivia's grip on the folder tightened slightly, not from tension, from certainty. Then it's time, she said. Mark studied her. You're going to move forward now? Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back at the closed boardroom door, at everything inside it, at everything that had been said, everything that had been revealed, and everything that still hadn't. Then she turned back. Yes, she said, her voice calm, decided. And they're not ready for what that means. Caleb didn't follow her right away. For a moment, he stayed in that room, standing at the edge of a table that no longer felt like his. The votes had been cast, the words had been said, but the outcome, whatever it was, had slipped out of his control without him fully understanding how, what just happened. Vanessa whispered from behind him. No one answered her. Harold had already turned back to the documents, his expression tight, focused now in a way that had nothing to do with Caleb anymore. The other board members avoided eye contact, flipping through papers, checking phones, suddenly occupied with anything but the man they had just supported minutes ago. Caleb felt it. The shift. Subtle, but undeniable. He turned sharply. We had majority support, he said. You all saw that. Harold didn't look up. We had support, he corrected. That's not the same as authority. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then make it authority. It doesn't work that way, Harold replied. Caleb stepped forward, his voice lowering. Then explain to me how it does work. Harold finally looked at him, and for the first time, there was no alignment in his expression. Only caution. Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully, you're dealing with a structure that predates you. One that has specific ownership layers. We cannot move forward without clarity on those. Caleb exhaled sharply. And she's the one providing the clarity now? Yes. That answer came too quickly, too easily. Caleb's eyes narrowed. She's been hiding this, he said. Harold didn't respond, because that wasn't the right word, but it wasn't wrong enough to correct either. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice tighter now. Caleb's, maybe we should just— Not yet, he snapped again, but his tone lacked the certainty it had before, because something had slipped, and he could feel it. Across the room, one of the board members spoke up quietly. We should wait for the official legal confirmation before making any further commitments. Another nodded. Agreed. That was all it took. Momentum gone. Caleb looked around, searching for the same support he had felt just minutes earlier. It wasn't there anymore, not in the same way, because now there was doubt, and doubt was enough to stall everything. He turned toward the door, toward where Olivia had left. I'm going to talk to her, he said. No one stopped him. No one encouraged him either. Because this part wasn't theirs anymore. It was his and hers. He stepped out into the hallway, his pace faster now, sharper. Vanessa hesitated for half a second before following. Olivia hadn't gone far. She stood near the window at the end of the corridor, looking out over the city. The skyline stretched beyond the glass, steady, indifferent, unchanged by anything that had just happened inside. Mark stood a few feet away, speaking quietly into his phone. He ended the call as Caleb approached. Give us a minute, Caleb said. Mark didn't argue. He simply nodded once to Olivia and stepped aside. Vanessa lingered behind Caleb, uncertain again. Wait outside, Caleb said without looking at her. This time, she obeyed. The door closed softly behind her. Silence settled. Caleb stood there for a second, trying to find the right place to begin. He didn't, so he went straight at it. What are you doing? He asked. Olivia didn't turn immediately. She kept her gaze on the city for a moment longer. Then she faced him. That answer only made his frustration spike. Don't do that, he said. Don't act like this is nothing. It isn't nothing, she replied. Then explain it. Her eyes met his, calm. Steady, you wouldn't have listened, she said. That hit, because it was true, and he knew it. I'm listening now, he said. She tilted her head slightly. Are you? His jaw tightened. Yes. She studied him for a moment, then shook her head, just slightly. No, she said. You're reacting. Different this time. More personal. You let me walk into that room thinking I was leading this, he said. You let them believe it too. I didn't tell you that you were, she replied. You didn't correct it. You didn't ask. That landed harder than anything else. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simply accurate. Caleb exhaled, running a hand through his hair. So what is this? Some kind of test? Olivia's expression didn't change. No, she said. It's a consequence. For what? She looked at him. Really looked at him, and for a brief second, something softer flickered there. Not weakness, not hesitation. Memory, then it was gone. For believing you understood everything, she said. His eyes narrowed. I built my company. You built something, she acknowledged. But not this. He took a step closer. Then tell me what this is. Olivia didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag again, not for the same folder, for something else. A thinner document, more personal. She held it in her hand, considering it for a second, then looked back at him. You wanted clarity, she said. I still do. She nodded once, then extended the document toward him. He took it, without hesitation, without caution, because he still believed this was something he could read his way through, understand, control. His eyes dropped to the page. The first line caught his attention immediately, then the second, then the signature. His grip tightened. What is this? He asked, his voice lower now. Olivia didn't look away. Something you signed, she said. He frowned. I don't remember. You didn't read it, she said. That stopped him. Because suddenly that felt true, too. He looked down again, scanning faster now. Legal terms, clauses, and then a not his, hers. His breathing shifted, subtle, but real. This doesn't, he started. It does, she said. He looked up at her, something unsettled breaking through. You're saying, what? He asked. Olivia held his gaze. Not cold, not distant, clear. I'm saying, she said, you've been standing inside something you never actually owned. The words hung between them, heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time, Caleb didn't have an answer. He looked back down at the document. Read it again, slower this time, more carefully. Because now, he wasn't reading to confirm what he believed. He was reading to understand what he had missed, and the more he read, the quieter he became. Behind him, the hallway stayed still. The boardroom door remained closed, and Olivia, she didn't move, didn't speak again, because this moment, this was the beginning of something else. Not power, not control. Truth. And Caleb had just started to see it. But not all of it. Not yet, because at the bottom of the page there was one more clause. One he hadn't reached. One that would change everything he thought he still had left. The boardroom felt different now. Not louder, not colder, just settled. Olivia sat at the head of the table, not because she needed to prove anything anymore, but because that was where her name had always placed her. The documents in front of her were clean, structured, final. No tension in the room, no second guessing, just decisions being made, one after another, with clarity. Motion carried, Harold said quietly, marking the last page. The restructuring was complete. Not dramatic, not explosive, just precise, the way it should have been all along. Olivia nodded once, closing her folder. Around her, the board members shifted. Some still adjusting to the reality of her position, others already treating it as normal. Respect had replaced uncertainty, not because of what she revealed, but because of how she handled it. She didn't rush, didn't overstep, didn't make it personal. That was what stayed with them. Power, when it was real, didn't need to announce itself, it simply held. When the meeting ended, people stood, offering brief acknowledgments. Some with quiet admiration, others with careful professionalism. No one questioned her now, not anymore. Outside, the hallway was calm. The same glass walls, the same city beyond them. But something inside her had shifted. Not triumph, relief, something quieter. Balance. Mark caught up with her near the elevators. "Everything's in place," he said. "Operations are stabilizing faster than expected." She nodded. "Keep the transition steady. No sudden changes." He studied her for a second. "You're not going to push further?" "No," she said. And she meant it, because this was never about taking more. It was about correcting what had been misused. Mark gave a small nod, understanding more than he asked. "Then it's done." Olivia watched the elevator doors close behind him. Done. The word felt strange, because for so long everything had been unfinished, unspoken, unresolved. Now it wasn't. Later that afternoon she stood alone in a smaller office, one she had chosen for herself. Not the largest, not the most impressive. Just quiet, functional. Enough. The city stretched out again beyond the window, but this time, she didn't look at it like something to manage. She looked at it like something that simply existed. Separate from her. Her phone buzzed once on a message. Unknown number. She already knew who it was before opening it. "Caleb. I was wrong. I didn't understand what I was standing in, or who you were. I'm not asking for anything. Just, I see it now." She read it once, then again. There was no anger left in her when she saw his name. No satisfaction either, just distance, because the realization had come too late. Not for the company, not for the power, for them. She set the phone down without replying, not as punishment, just as a decision. Some things didn't need answers anymore. That evening, she walked out of the building without being stopped, without being watched, without needing anyone's approval. The air outside felt different, cooler, cleaner, or maybe she just noticed it more now. Across the street, people moved through their own lives, conversations, laughter, ordinary things that had nothing to do with wealth or control. For a long time, she had carried everything quietly. The company, the expectations, the marriage that slowly turned into something smaller than what it was meant to be. And through all of it, she had stayed. Not because she couldn't leave, because she believed something could still be respected. She had been wrong about that. But not about herself. That part mattered more. Days passed, then weeks. The company stabilized fully under her direction. Decisions were made, but not aggressively. She didn't dismantle everything Caleb had built. She didn't erase his name from every corner. She simply corrected what needed to be corrected and left the rest where it belonged. There were consequences. There always were. Caleb lost his position, not through humiliation, but through process. Contracts reviewed, responsibilities reassigned, a quiet exit that spoke louder than any public downfall. His parents stepped back as well, not forced, but reduced. Their influence no longer carried the same weight once the structure was understood. Vanessa disappeared from the narrative as quickly as she had entered it. Not because Olivia pushed her out, because without the illusion of power, there was nothing left for her to hold on to. And Olivia, she moved forward. Not upward. Forward. She rebuilt her life outside of what anyone expected her to be. Her name no longer hidden, her role no longer questioned, but also no longer defining her entirely, because for the first time, she wasn't choosing silence to protect something. She was choosing it for herself. One quiet evening, she stood again by a window, not in a boardroom, not in a corporate tower, just a simple space she had made her own. There was no pressure there, no expectation, just stillness. And in that stillness, she understood something clearly. Power wasn't what she held over others. It was what no one could take from her anymore. Her voice, her choices, her peace. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew your worth, maybe you understand this kind of ending. And if you were in her place, would you have walked away the same way?